Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's LinkedIn Live session. I'm Bonnie Schneider, Sustainability Contributor to the TechStrong Group, and I'm pleased to have you here all joining us now for this informative and engaging conversation. With Earth Day just 2 days away, now is the perfect time to discuss the impact of climate change on the tech industry and sustainable solutions. And I'd also like to introduce our new sustainability initiative at TechStrong, EcoTech Insights. We're also going to discuss innovative solutions for reducing emissions in the tech sector, ESG regulations, and their importance to DevOps professionals. Remember, this is an interactive conversation, so I encourage all of you to participate by asking questions and sharing your thoughts in the comments section. We're going to do our best to address as many of you as possible with your questions during the live stream. So in just a moment, we're going to get started. I'm just going to make sure I can see your questions here, and we'll get started. Okay. All right, well, I'm going to begin to talk a little bit about climate change and how it's leading to more extreme weather events. Many of these are lasting and longer lasting, and they're more intense. We're also seeing them occur in locations where they may not have decades ago. My background is as a meteorologist, and I have witnessed an increasing amount of these disasters occurring in terms of the frequency and intensity of extreme weather events, certainly over the past 2 decades. Now, these changes are linked, many of them, to different types of weather, is what I'm referring to. They can be linked directly to climate change, and some are, of course, directly linked to human activities and the resulting emissions of greenhouse gases. As a result, it has become more critical than ever to understand the impacts of climate change on various industries, including the IT sector. IT infrastructure and services can be impacted by extreme weather events such as floods, wildfires, and heat waves. These events can disrupt operations, damage equipment, and lead to downtime. So before I go to some examples, I just want to make sure that I can see your comments. Right now, I can't see any on my page, but we can get that set up, fixed. Okay, so I'm just going to refresh my page so I can see. Chris, are we getting any comments coming in? Okay, great, not yet. Okay, so hopefully there, now I can see it. Okay, all right. So first I want to share with you some examples of some of the weather events that we've seen that have had direct impacts globally that have affected the IT infrastructure, data centers, and some places that you may have already read about this when it happened. So first I want to go back to 2011. There was flooding in Thailand, and that disrupted the supply chain for back then hard disk drives, and that led to a 28% reduction in global disks produced. Major companies like Western Digital had to halt their operations in affected areas. And in New York City, this was one I covered personally, Superstorm Sandy. Remember, that was in 2012. Well, not only did that cause major power outages that affected so many and flooding damage, but we also saw flooding at data centers, such as Datagram's facility right in New York City. And that led to downtime for websites that you might know, like BuzzFeed or the Huffington Post. Damages were estimated to be at $30 billion. Now we'll bring things a little closer to the current time. In 2019, there was a major heat wave in Europe, and that led to increased cooling costs for data centers, with temperatures reaching record highs, 46 degrees Celsius to 114 degrees Fahrenheit. That's pretty hot. Well, that impacted facilities like OVH's data center in Strasbourg, France, and also in California in 2020, the following year, wildfires affected air quality and caused temporary shutdowns of data centers. In fact, Apple had to temporarily close its Elk Grove facility due to poor air quality caused by the fires. And one thing you have to remember about wildfires and air quality, the air quality can remain poor long after the fire has been put out. So you can still have poor air quality even weeks after. And another thing to note is that the winds can travel the ash and the soot from those wildfires for miles. So it can, even if you're not directly next to where the fire is, facilities can be impacted by those wildfires. Wildfires are also burning with more intensity and affecting more areas due to climate change. Well, let's talk about 2021. So we're switching gears in extreme weather events. First, we're talking about wildfires, but let's talk about winter. Do you remember this? Just in 2021, there was a massive winter storm in Texas, and it led to tremendous power outages, but it also disrupted IT services, and that impacted companies like Rackspace, which had to rely on backup generators to keep their data centers running during the crisis. I want to go to the live stream and see if we have any comments yet. Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting about how this is all affecting, weather is affecting so many areas of IT infrastructure. I think we think of personally how it affects our homes when we lose power, and it certainly does, but it also affects the community in a greater way. Now, I want to also bring it back to even more recently, because just last year in 2022, we had record heat. Remember, in London and across Europe, record hot temperatures. In fact, the hottest temperatures ever in parts of France. Well, I wrote about this recently on my blog on EcoTechInsights.com. That's spelled EcoTechInsights.com. And that's a brand new website connected to DevOps.com, where you can read more about what happened in 22 and how the heat impacted data centers there. And a lot of other information. It's a website which we just debuted. You'll be able to see videos that air on TechStrong TV with thought leaders in climate tech, those that are coming up with incredible solutions for the climate crisis, how to track carbon emissions, and more. So I highly recommend you check out that website, EcoTechInsights.com. All right, well, I also want to talk about some of the indirect effects of extreme weather and climate change that affect disruptions to supply chains, for example, challenges to the workforce. How is everyone going to get to work when we have things shut down? And there's also an important note that you'd want to think a lot about: disaster recovery and infrastructure resilience planning, almost kind of just getting ready before it actually happens. And from my perspective and training as a meteorologist, I can tell you that it really is crucial for tech professionals to stay informed about weather events and forecasts, particularly when it comes to major disasters, kind of understanding where the risks are with everything from floods to wildfires to heat waves and other extreme events. And this will help IT professionals plan and implement measures to protect their infrastructure. And of course, the goal, maintain uninterrupted operations. So, I'd like to, before we go on, I want to just give you some strategies of how you can boost your organization's resilience to extreme weather events. And starting with the fact that we are now in April, we're in the spring season, and this is the biggest season where we see floods. So at least in the US. So I want to talk about the fact that it's a good idea for organizations to evaluate their flood risk and relocate critical infrastructure if necessary. Implement flood-resistant designs like barriers and flood walls, raised foundations, and always be ready for those potential supply chain disruptions, including alternate routes and suppliers. And of course, really for any of these events, you want to regularly review your plan and make sure you've taken the proper precautions to assess risk and plan for it with measures in place. Well, June 1st will be the start of the Atlantic hurricane season, and that affects so many people. So it's important that everyone, for their organizations, make sure you have your disaster plan in place. And this also applies to flooding, because this is a byproduct of these storms. Make sure your waterproof servers are enclosed, and implement redundant power supplies. Make sure you have backup generators and things like that. It's very important. Also, something we talked about with data centers, it's a good idea to invest in energy efficient cooling systems like liquid or free air cooling, implementing temperature monitoring systems to make sure that you have an automated rapid response. And of course, this is something we saw a lot during the pandemic that's carried on, is having remote work, especially during when we have these power outages or we have extreme heat events. That will help prevent that strain on resources. And finally, with wildfire risk, we want to implement fire-resistant designs like non-combustible materials, fire-resistant landscaping and fire breaks, and of course, make sure you have your disaster plan. It seems to be that that's the thing we want to echo the most, is have those plans in place. Okay, I'm just going to refresh my screen here. It looks like it's just to get some more comments coming in. It looks like we have some people participating. Apologize here, just trying to get these in. Okay, so we have a question here from Christopher Barnett, and his question is, how can we quantify the effectiveness of our sustainability initiatives? Great question, because that's really the thing. A lot of people have already started on this journey in becoming more sustainable, and they want to be able to talk about how they can improve those those areas and monitor it. One of the things that a lot of tech companies have done is relying more on renewable energy, and that includes sourcing solar or wind power for data centers. And that can significantly reduce the carbon footprint while ensuring uninterrupted operations. Some major companies that we all have heard of are implementing these strategies already. I wanted to highlight a few of them for you, like Apple's data center in Maiden, North Carolina. That's powered by a 100-acre solar farm, and that's one of the largest privately owned solar facilities in the US. Google has been carbon neutral since 2007, and they're working towards 24/7 carbon-free energy for its data centers. And they've invested in renewable energy projects, including wind farms in the US and Europe. Microsoft's data center in Cheyenne, Wyoming integrates wind and biogas power to achieve zero carbon operations. And that facility is powered by a local wind farm and a biogas powered fuel cell system. And finally, Amazon Web Services has set a goal to power its global infrastructure with 100% renewable energy. AWS has invested in several wind and solar farms worldwide to reach this objective. So the question may come that we're wondering, what can smaller companies do on these initiatives? Because not everyone has the ability to invest in these operations to make this significant amount of investment in what they're doing. So for smaller tech companies, I'd like to bring up some other sustainable solutions. One of the things you can do is to purchase renewable energy certificates. These are also called RECs, and smaller companies may not have the resources to invest directly in renewable energy. So if you buy an REC that represents environmental benefits for renewable energy generation, this allows them to support renewable energy indirectly and offset their electricity consumption. Another thing that I talk a lot about on EcoTech Insights is to operate with green hosting providers, and I've interviewed some of them as well for this for some of my segments. So you'll be able to see that as well. All right, so choosing web hosting providers that use renewable energy to power their data centers is often something that you can do as well. Install on-site renewable energy systems. Companies with their own facilities can invest in on-site renewable energy like rooftop solar panels, wind turbines. Installations can help offset a portion of the energy consumption and reduce energy costs. And of course, partner with local energy providers. So there's a lot of different ways that even smaller companies can make a difference and have more sustainable operations. And it's something that we're going to be talking a lot about on ecotechinsights.com as I interview thought leaders who are really creating some innovative solutions in these areas. I want to also encourage anyone, it's hard for me to see every question live that's coming in. I'm just going to refresh my screen. Seems to be a little slow, but we can take a look at the questions that are coming in. Okay, all right. So one of the questions I saw was we were asking about, quantifying the success of these initiatives. So through the KPIs that you can measure to consider your energy consumption is to using how much of renewable energy are you using? What is the measure of carbon emissions that are being reduced? And are you making improvements in waste management? And another question that came to me, I guess this one was through email. Can you explain the upcoming ESG rules and regulations in the EU globally and how they might affect the tech industry and why it's essential for DevOps professionals to be knowledgeable about ESG? Okay, I could definitely answer that because ESG is certainly something that everyone is talking about. So I'm going to break it down for everyone watching. So ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance. It's become a critical focus for businesses worldwide, including the tech industry. And we've seen a rise in new rules and regulations related to ESG, both in the EU and globally. I'd like to outline some of those regulations and how it might impact the tech industry. Well, we have the EU taxonomy regulation, and that establishes classification systems to define environmentally sustainable activities. So that's something that a tech firm, for example, in the EU would have to align their sustainability reporting with this taxonomy. And that's one to keep in mind. Another is the NRFD, which requires large companies to disclose information related to their ESG performance. And tech companies operating in the EU will be needing to comply with a lot of these reporting requirements, and that will help investors and stakeholders make informed decisions. There's also to know, those are just some of the mandatory ones that I mentioned, but there's also voluntary frameworks that tech companies are increasingly adopting to demonstrate their commitment to sustainability and transparency. Now, for those of you that work in DevOps, you may be wondering, well, what does this mean to me? Well, understanding ESG is important for several reasons for DevOps professionals. And let's talk about that for a minute. Understanding ESG risks, it allows companies and people that work in these organizations to drive innovation within the tech industry, which is really crucial for them to be aware and take action, like improving energy efficiency, reducing waste, and upholding ethical labor practices. It all comes together as part of ESG. So DevOps teams can help to develop sustainable products and operate in a more sustainable way, which of course is very supported by the stakeholders of the company. Plus, ESG initiatives also have collaboration across different teams. So DevOps professionals can help foster that from the IT areas to other parts of the company as well. And finally, and you may already have noticed this within your organization, when companies have strong ESG performance, they tend to attract and retain top talent, and that improves the transparency of the companies. So there's lots of different reasons that ESG disclosures influence investment decisions as well. And that's something to keep in mind. It seems that it's kind of an overriding issue that is leading to more sustainable products and services and better operational efficiency and supply chain management as well. So that makes a difference in creating a more resilient business model. And as I mentioned, ESG is something we're going to talk a lot more about on EcoTech Insights and some of the upcoming interviews I'll be doing that you could watch as well. And I think they'll be informative to get a better idea of what's happening with ESG globally and how any initiatives at your own company might be applicable to that. And of course, a big part of this whole sustainability movement that we're doing in the initiative at the TechStrong Group is to give you better information and expert insights and information that you can use in your own work and what you're doing, and create an interactive dialogue so we can better understand the sustainability space and share the latest innovations and the latest solutions that are being brought about. And of course, as I mentioned at the top of this, we have 2 days to Earth Day. It's really Earth Month throughout the month of April. So this really was the perfect time to do this LinkedIn Live. And it looks like I don't see another question from the 3 that I mentioned already. So I'm going to move along because I'm sure some of you are in the middle of your lunch hour. So we're going to wrap up this LinkedIn Live session. And I want to thank you all for your active participation and the questions that came in from ESG to DevOps. It was really a diverse group, and I appreciate that. And I think it's clear that understanding and addressing the impacts of climate change and embracing ESG principles really makes a difference for the tech industry. And it's a big part of what's going to be happening in the future. So we're fostering innovation and ensuring resilience in the face of the many extreme weather events that I mentioned, with spring now being the season for flooding, and then we're going to go into hurricane season and times of extreme heat, excessive heat that, as I mentioned, just last year caused major problems in the UK. So I would love for everyone that's watching now to continue to collaborate, reach out to me, and share ideas at ecotechinsights.com as we support each other in this journey towards more sustainable tech sector. Remember to check out ecotechinsights.com for more information on sustainable solutions and innovations. Once again, I'm Bonnie Schneider. I'm a sustainability contributor to the TechStrong Group, and it's been a pleasure discussing these interesting and important topics with you today. I hope everyone has a terrific rest of your day and a great Earth Day, and let's keep the conversation going. Take care.